They were doing that 10,000 years ago. So I've taken on the persona of the spiritual MD, and this is our podcast, The Ageless Blueprint. We have a school community we where I can help teach you a lot of these things that I've been discovering, and I hope you can join that. But today, what we're going to do, our last podcast, we talked about the stress connection, and that's one of the books we wrote. You can see that behind me. We wrote a book called The Stress Connection. Well, what I'm focusing on now is how we can disconnect from stress. I've been talking about the stress connection. I've been kind of going through these 4 steps that we're going to talk about now. But I have discovered I can enhance those steps by adding one really important thing that I hadn't been emphasizing in the past, and that's meditation. And that's one of the key ways to disconnect yourself from stress. And so we're going to go through these 4 steps. Hopefully this can help you. These are some things you can do. I'm going to give you some tools you can use, some websites, some apps you can use. So we're really going to get into the part of this podcast where I'm actually giving you information that you can use to actually change and transform your life. Why am I doing this podcast? Because I have been doing some things lately that has really transformed me. I mean, has made me a new person. And at 64, almost 65 years old, I am excited about what I'm becoming. I'm not looking at what I'm going to have to give up. I'm looking at what I can add to my life. And they said, you want to always be expanding your knowledge, expanding your experiences. And I don't care how old you are, just keep expanding, stop contracting. And what stress does, it makes you contract. It makes you worried about everything. It makes you scared to do certain things. So we don't want to contract. We want to always be expanding our knowledge. And I'm going to tell you, that's how you stay young. That's how you stay ageless, is by always learning and always be willing to change. I'm telling you, if you get stuck in your ways, you're going to be, I hate to say it, an old fool. And my parents used to always say, it's okay to be a young fool, but it's not okay to be an old fool. Okay, so that's what I want to try and convey to you. So, hey, Rebel, this is my great producer, Rebel. How are you doing today, Rebel?
I am doing well, thank you.
All right. I'm fine. I don't know. Hey, I'm old enough to look at this Frasier. And Frasier always had Roz in the background to talk to. So Rebel is my Roz, but I'm going to treat her better than Frasier used to treat Roz. Okay, so so Rebel is my Batman, or my Robin to Batman, or whatever. So she organizes all these things for me, and she is my interaction. But I also want to interact with you guys, and I want you to leave comments in our podcast. When you see our podcast, it's at Ageless Blueprint Podcast. All of our podcasts are there. Please leave comments. I will respond. And if you have questions during this time, Rebel will kind of be our interpreter. She'll kind of organize the questions and try and get those in before it's over with. So let's get to this stress disconnection. That's what we want to talk about today. So can you pull up those slides? All right. Breaking the stress cycle, 4 steps to reclaim your life. And it only, okay, so I always want to try and simplify things in a way where you can actually remember them. So, 4 steps, 5 steps, or whatever. So these are the 4 steps, okay? So let's go to the next slide. So see, this is a problem. We talked about this on my last podcast, is how prevalent this is. I told you, we wrote this book, The Stress Connection, back in like 2002 or 2003. We wrote the first book, Are Your Hormones Making You Sick? That was published in 2000. And we probably started learning about this in the 1998, 1999, and we wrote the book in 2000. And then we found out that just correcting hormones weren't enough. And we started to understand the connection to stress. And primarily it was this study that showed that 75 to 90% of all visits to primary care physicians are for stress-related complaints or disorders. So from that, I was like, wow, if I'm an expert on stress, I'll be right 75 to 90% of the time with my patients. And that study was way back in like 2002, I think. And just think what that percentage is in 2025. It's probably 95 to 98%. So I think this is really important. That's why I talk about it all the time. And that's why I want to impress upon you that this is probably the major disease starter in everybody is this stress. All right. So there's 4 major systems that are affected, and they also lead to like 5 common symptoms. But let's just go to the next slide. All right. So here's what keeps you stuck. There's some stressor. It can be a person, it can be a place, it can be a thing. But there's some stressor that gives you the impetus to have the stress response. And that stress response is fight or flight. Okay, so your body's always thinking that it has to run or it has to fight. And so that changes your whole physiology, where all of your energy goes towards your muscles, and it negates the part of your body that actually keeps you safe. So you think you're running towards safe or running away from safe, but really what your body is doing is preparing you to run or fight. So the other part of your nervous system is called rest and digest. Okay, so if you don't rest, you can't recuperate from that fight. See, usually animals, they run or they fight, then they rest and recuperate. Well, we don't do that. Okay, we are stressed 24/7. So we are always in this fight or flight. So we don't have any energy going toward our digestion. If you don't digest, the only way you can get in, well, the best way to get energy is to get it from your food. So you have to eat food that has energy. That means non-processed food, energy that actually are food that actually has energy in it, and it hasn't been cooked out of it or hadn't been baked out of it. So you need to eat food that has energy, and your stomach or your GI system has to have enough energy to digest it, and it has to have enough blood going to it to pick up the nutrients to go to these certain areas. Okay, so it's so very important to get out of that fight or flight, but it's so hard because we have so many of these stressors. So after a while, if you don't have any nutrients, you haven't rested and recovered, you haven't been sleeping, or you haven't gotten good deep sleep, well, eventually you're going to have tissue damage because your tissue isn't getting the nutrients that it needs. And so now you have tissue damage, and tissue damage leads to disease. Also, your immune system, which is your long-term protection device, it is primarily in your gut. So when your gut doesn't work, your immune system doesn't work. And then there's something called a gut-brain connection, is that when your gut doesn't work, your brain also doesn't work. So now this stress response it has done 2 things. It's taken energy away from the place where you need to gain it so you can face the next day of having stress. And also, when all of this oxygen and all of this blood goes to the muscles and you're not running or fighting, it produces lactic acid. And lactic acid is what happens when you go and work out, when you haven't worked out for a long time and your muscles are sore for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Well, just think, if your body thinks it's been running or fighting or has been preparing for that and nothing happens, then what happens is it causes muscle pain and muscle aches. And we end up calling that fibromyalgia. And I talked about that last time. So now you see how this one stressor or this one trigger, when it's there long enough, it's almost like if you have a splinter in your hand long enough and you don't take care of it, it'll infect your whole body just from a little splinter in your finger. Okay, so that's how you got to look at this. All right, next slide. Rebel, am I making sense?
Absolutely. We have a question. How do you know if the body is absorbing nutrients?
Well, there's tests for that. I'll tell you one thing. I can look at your cortisol curve from saliva testing. And if your cortisol curve is normal, it's telling me that, hey, your stress response is okay. All right. You can look at something called heart rate variability. It can tell me if you're sympathetic and parasympathetic.